For the first hour or so, this game felt like being invited into a mystery that didn't want to reassure me. A slow, unsettling sense that understanding the rules might matter more than surviving the day. Not tense in a jump scare way, not stressful in a fail state way, just quietly unstable. And that feeling, that instability, is the entire reason I kept going, because it felt intentional. That initial instability isn't accidental. It's the fantasy the game is selling. Pathologic 3 isn't about power, mastery, or even resolution. It's about interpretation. You're not meant to feel like a hero, or even a competent problem solver. You're meant to feel like a doctor detective dropped into a system that doesn't fully make sense yet, whether that be socially, medically, or morally. The pacing is slow on purpose. The fantasy isn't, can you fix this? It's, can you live with what you don't understand yet? And that fantasy lives or dies on the systems, not the story beats. Because if the systems don't reinforce that feeling, the whole thing collapses. This is where I want to get into the mental state mechanic. The most important system early on is also the least explained. Mania and apathy aren't just meters. They shape how you're allowed to exist in the world. Dialogue options, physical actions, even small movement behaviors are filtered through your current mental balance. Early on, this feels elegant. You're not role-playing a consistent personality, you're managing volatility. Kicking objects, using water pumps for no reason, standing by trash can fires, saying things that don't line up cleanly with your intent. These don't feel like jokes, they feel like regulation behaviors. And for the first hour, this system reinforces the fantasy almost perfectly. That mental instability is then layered onto the game's time structure, days, mirrors, and a limited resource that controls how often you can go back in time and revise outcomes. The game strongly suggests that failure is meaningful here. You're encouraged to accept that you won't do everything in a day. Mirrors crack when you die. Amalgam limits how often you can rewrite events. So naturally, you start to believe something important. That exhaustion itself might be an ending. That running out of interpretive tools might mean something. And for a while, that implication really carries the experience. That expectation is reinforced by how information works early on. Knowledge doesn't feel like progress. It feels like leverage or danger. Every theory about the plague feels like it could help someone, or get someone killed, or destabilize how authority sees you. Nothing really resolves cleanly. Certainty feels dangerous, and for the opening stretch, that's very compelling. It feels like the game is asking, which version of events are you willing to live with? That question becomes the emotional engine of the game, right up until the friction reveals what it's actually asking instead. And this, I think, is where people will begin to bounce off of Pathologic 3. Because structurally, the game does not do what it strongly implies early on. You are not allowed to fail early in a meaningful way. You are not allowed to exhaust the system and let that stand as a conclusion. If you run out of resources and die, the game ultimately enforces a hard restart, not a resolution. And that matters, because what initially felt like existential pressure turns out to be compliance pressure. You must keep going. You must survive until a fixed horizon. Once that becomes clear, the meaning of repetition changes. What felt like inquiry now becomes obligation. Objectively, the game succeeds at what it sets out to do. The opening is unsettling, the systems are coherent, and the tone is confident and deliberate. But subjectively, the thing I was most invested in, the idea that exhaustion itself might be expressive, turns out not to be true. Once that realization lands, my motivation changed. Not because the game is necessarily bad, but because the question it's asking is no longer the same question that originally pulled me in. I think this game is best for players who enjoy long-form systems, are willing to accept repetition as structure, and are comfortable being pushed toward a fixed endpoint. I don't think it's for players who are hoping the game would let collapse stand as its own conclusion, or who wanted failure to be interpretive rather than erased. Pathologic 3 is thoughtful, ambitious, and unsettling, but it ultimately demands persistence more than it permits refusal. And whether that works for you depends less on taste and more on what you hoped the uncertainty meant. Have you played the Pathologic series before? If so, leave a comment below about what you think about Pathologic 3, and make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching.